Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And welcome back. We begin our first conversation of the morning with Senator Elena Smith. He is the president of the Belize National Teachers Union. And of course, we're going to be discussing everything that has to do with education amid the COVID pandemic. That being said, good morning, Senator Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Belize, and thank you for having us.
Where do we stand at present? Today is the first day of school for persons who are either starting high school or returning to high school for that matter. We're in the throes of a third wave of infections, and the decision has been made to push back actual face-to-face instructions to sometime in October. In the context of that, what can you share with us in terms of the position of the teachers union, perhaps based on conversations you've had with members?
Okay, so as we looked forward to the reopening of school, a lot of our teachers, based on what we heard from them and what we've seen, them, posting that sort of thing, were eagerly awaiting seeing their students after so long. But as we looked at the cases rising, we realized early on that this would not become a reality. Even before the ministry made the announcement or the pronouncement, we knew that looking at, especially Belize City, we see where our cases go up so much on a daily basis, that this might not have been the best time to reopen for face-to-face classes. And so when the announcement was made, teachers were not relieved that they could not return to the classroom, but they were relieved that a decision was made seeing where we are in terms of numbers, because we are concerned not just about our teachers but about our students as well. And we have seen now where even if you have gotten your 2 shots, you are still able to contract, you're able to transmit. And that is a concern for many of our teachers and our parents as well. So I don't think the concern was returning to the classroom, but rather if we were able to return fully and not just go back and then have to close down in 2 weeks' time. That was a huge concern for our teachers as well, because going back and having the children in the classroom and then suddenly you have to say, okay, stay home because of the situation, that was a huge concern.
Yeah.
The online is another huge concern, has always been, will continue to be, because we don't believe that our students are as prepared as they ought to be for online classes, one, in terms of devices, in terms of access. And even our teachers, a lot of our teachers, had to go out of their way, had to struggle a bit to get their devices for the new school year. With the cut in salary, and all that is happening, some of them are preparing for the classroom, some of them have internship. So a lot of little issues that were happening that teachers were concerned about. But all in all, we know that our teachers will do their best to ensure that students are engaged in the online classes.
Now, the preparation, I think leading up to just last week, was about going back into the classroom. And there had to be that period where the Ministry of Education would go in and check the schools and ensure that everything was up to par. While I know that's gone on pause, what was the feedback you got from the schools in terms of what it took to get the school ready for face-to-face?
Well, we didn't do any checks this year, but for the last school year, it was a struggle for many of our schools. I went around to several of the rural areas, especially in the Orange Walk district and the Corozal district, and the concern was the cost of putting all of those things, in the school. So, for example, the wash hand basins, having to run pipes, and a lot of those principals who we met made mention that, listen, we are not getting much help from the management, if any at all. At the time, the ministry went and just delivered maybe 2 basins, and it was just delivered and it was left there, nothing else. And so they had to figure out how they were going to get the funds to install those basins, to buy pipes, all of those things. And so without the help of some of the community members, a lot of those schools would not have been able to have what they put in place for the reopening of school. So it was really and truly difficult on a lot of the principals. We have some schools right now, some rural schools right now, who still are not fully ready for face-to-face. And when I say ready, in terms of what the ministry had expected the schools to have to cater for the number of students that they have. A lot of some of our schools are still not ready, but what can they do? If it is that they have to open, they have to open, and they have to try and do with what they have.
Does the postponement of face-to-face instructions at this point buy time, so to speak, for them to be able to at least try to get up to scratch with these requirements?
The issue is not necessarily time, the issue is finances.
Okay.
So if these parents, because they were out, many of them didn't pay their school fees. And we know that a lot of them couldn't afford because of the situation. In normal times, you hardly get 100% of your school fees paid. And we know that many of our schools, most of our schools, use those fees for them to be able to, to purchase what they need to purchase for the school, do repairs, all of those things. And if they don't do fundraising in between that, they won't be able to assist their schools. And so the issue for those schools is funding, not necessarily time, but funding.
Senator, I'm glad you brought up that point, because that has been a hot button issue in the public domain for quite a bit. Since the announcement of return to distance and online schooling, many parents are now questioning whether or not they should have to pay the full fees as the schools would normally collect during a regular year. Now, we've heard from the school saying, hey, listen, yes, this is, perhaps you are not using the computer lab, but we still have to pay electricity bills or stuff like that. So there's a maintenance needed, but for parents who are especially cash-strapped in this economy, they're saying, I don't think it's fair for me to pay it. Where does the union stand on this issue?
Well, Marlene, as a parent myself, I can understand those parents. Because when you have to find, for example, over $1,000 to pay for the school year, for things that you know that your child will not be using any at all for that year, at least parents are saying, at least give us a discount. Because we know that the schools have bills to pay, but my child isn't using the lab, my child isn't, using any bathroom facilities. There's no need for security to be paid because we are not there. So there are certain of the costs included in the fee that parents are saying, listen, if you can't wipe it off completely, then give us a discount because our child would not be at school. And I can understand that from a parent's perspective. I can understand that. From the school's perspective, I can understand that, yes, even though you are not here, we still have bills. But even though you still have bills, those bills might be reduced because you don't have the students there, using electricity, using water. You don't have to pay certain persons to be there. You still have to maintain the grounds, yes. But I am sure that the cost would have lessened by not having students on the compound for the entire year. And so I believe it's something that maybe the ministry should have a discussions with those managements to discuss, what would be the best way that we can help our parents in this kind of situation, and what is the best offer that you can give to your parents in terms of them not being in school. Because for last school year, we weren't in school. My child wasn't in school any at all for the whole of the school year, but I still had to pay that $1,600, $1,700 for the school year. So I understand where parents are coming from.
Who makes the decision as to whether or not they'll alter the fees? Is it the managing authority?
The managing authority, yes, makes those decisions, but the ministry has some input in that. And so I believe that the ministry can have those discussions with those managements, and see how best they can work out something for those, especially secondary school. Because primary school isn't as costly for some, isn't as costly as secondary schools.
You mentioned earlier one of the primary concerns being the issue of devices, especially since we're reverting back to online lessons. Speak to us on that, because as far as I understand, at some point there was a rollout of devices to students who were doing the online courses. I also gather that some of those devices were in need of repair, and so you have a situation now where students are without devices at the beginning of the school year. Can you expand on that for us?
Yes, as we understand, the devices would have been for first and second form students. And when they needed repairs, they had to be taken back, and then those had to be sent somewhere here in the city for repairs. And then we are understanding from some parents that, well, parents who are teachers, that for some schools you end up having to pay about $2,000 or so for the repair of those computers. And if you take back the computers and you don't, or you can't pay for those repairs, then you won't have one the following school year. So that poses a huge concern for those parents who really and truly cannot afford. So if you are giving me a device, you are buying these things, you are giving out these devices, and you don't bring, for example, the parts that are needed to repair these things, then it's like, what are you bringing? So I have to go and do the repairs. Parents were saying, well, maybe it would be best if the devices were sold to the students and they pay a monthly fee, for that, and then the repairs would fall on the parents, and so you would always have one, or at least they would try their best to have one. But if you have to take it back to the school and you have to wait for these persons or these companies to repair them, it takes some time. So that has been a concern from some of the parents that we have who are teachers, the cost of getting back those devices. So I don't know how or what they will do to ensure that those students who don't have will be getting a replacement device. I don't know how that will work out. I haven't heard anything from the ministry in terms of that area.
Well, I think the last time there was the reopening of school and there was the allowance for face-to-face, there were surveys being done with parents about whether or not they had access to devices and what preference they had. I haven't heard as much of that this time around, but we do know that there are still families who don't have the same level of access to technology as other households. What's the concern from teachers at this time about the inequity that is extending?
Again, a huge concern. We have had that those comments being shared with us for almost a whole year last year.
Yeah.
And it's not just for students, it's including teachers as well, because you are in some areas and your internet keeps dropping. By the time you are trying to explain something, internet goes either for you or for the children. You have to come back. So it has been a lot of concerns, issues as it relates to the internet issue, connectivity issue. And you know that you saw the news with the young man from Wesley, how he went to school using just his phone. I mean, so you will have some parents and some students who will really and truly try their best and do whatever they can to ensure that they are engaged. But then you will have others who maybe they might not know better and they don't know how to use the devices, and so they would not push their children, or the children won't push themselves. When you're in the classroom in front of a teacher, it's easier for you to be engaged than when you're behind a computer or behind a phone.
Sorry, go ahead.
So we have to ensure, and I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to ensure that these students have these devices and they are able to work in the environment that they are. Teachers are critical as well. So that the ministry is now giving teachers a data plan for them to be able to work from home. But the thing, even though I get a data plan at a discounted rate, if my area has connectivity issues, then I will still have some issues. I will still have problems.
Which brings me to this question. How does that play out in the context of the remote villages, for instance, in the south of the country, where perhaps two things are at play here? Access to internet and, of course, access to the devices as well. How does that play out?
Those areas would then have to do packages because there's no way. I mean, when you go down south, by the time you get to certain areas, you have no service any at all. And so
or you switch over to the Guatemalan.
Correct. So we see where sometimes we are having our meetings and our vice president who lives in Pueblo, he has to be on a hill or in a tree or something trying to get access so that he can stay in the meeting. And that is the same for our students. So those areas would have to be giving packages as opposed to going online. It's not feasible for them. They have no access any at all. I mean, if you go to Graham Creek, for example, there's nothing that you can do in terms of internet services at Graham Creek at this point in time. So those have to be packages sent home to parents. The concern that we have heard with regards to packages that teachers take time to prepare these packages and they send them home, and sometimes they don't get them back. When they do get them back, half of the work is complete, the other half is missing, and if they send them back for completion, they don't get them back. So again, there has to be some seriousness on the part of all parties. If I am sending the work home to you, you have to ensure that your child is doing the work. And if the work is incomplete and I say to you it's incomplete, then ensure that the child does the work. So it has to be where the parent and the teacher and the students all work together to ensure that we get through this phase until we are able to go back face to face. We can't just hold the teacher and say, well, listen, it's your students and you must get them to do the work. Because when I send that package home, I have no more control over what happens in the home. I can only do my part and I can send my package.
And that's where the demand changes quite often on the teachers, and I know it's very dependent on the parents within the classroom. The obligation is, of course, preparing the package, sending it out, and I guess some lesson plans as well. But how can you actually ensure that this information is going to be imparted to the child?
And again, that has been one of the worries that we have, because you can prepare the best package with as much information as you can find, work that you give all of the examples. But if the child doesn't do the work, if the parent doesn't ensure the child does the work, then what use will it be? The child would be lagging behind. And we realize that right now with the situation, many of our children would not be at the level that they should be, because they're not getting those instructions the way they'll be getting them in the classroom face to face. So we are aware of that. And so when these children return to the classroom, we have to ensure that as teachers, we find where they are and we work with them as best as we can to try and bring them at least as close to or to the point that they should be. And I hope that nobody expects that when the children return to the classroom for face-to-face and when we are able to go full air face-to-face, that our teachers are not being blamed for where the children are in terms of the class level. Because we know being out for a whole year, more than a year, will put back a lot of our children from where they should be, especially the younger ones who need that one-on-one with your phonics, with your math learning numbers and those kinds of things. What we would do in the classroom, the parents might not do at home.
Or know how to do, to be very fair to them either.
And even if you send instructions, some of them don't understand it, some of them can't read it, some of them. So it's a whole lot of issues that are there on the table that will cause our children to maybe not be where they should be. But we have to understand, as teachers, as parents, as ministry, that this will take some time for us to bridge that gap. It can't happen overnight.
Now, the ministry has undertaken kind of a study to understand what are the current challenges due to the pandemic's impact on school. One of those issues has been, they've identified that there are higher incidents of dropouts, especially among young males. And there's also a very clear learning gap that is taking place. Have you seen this data, and what concerns you the most?
It wasn't shared with us, so we haven't seen the results of that information. But again, from all people, from all teachers, sharing what they see in their communities, sharing what they are hearing from parents, and we have seen where a lot of especially those high school students who are in third, fourth form, we see them go and get a job somewhere, and that's it for them. The moment they get a job, they won't go back to that classroom. And we have been hearing from the high school teachers that a lot of their students are not doing their work. When they check in with them, well, miss, I'm working. So the situation at hand might require for some of these students to have to find a work to help their families, to help themselves. And so that is the reality.
So the teachers are reporting that they're seeing that.
Especially the high school students, as I said, the third and fourth farmers.
Let me digress a bit and ask you for your thoughts on the ministry's position to do away with with primary school examinations and other forms of standardized testing.
We did just a quick polling, not just on our Facebook page, to gather from our teachers, what were their their thoughts on that. And I would say 99.9% of those teachers who responded were satisfied or were happy with that move. Because a lot of them were saying that the PSC really and truly is used to not just look at where students are in terms of the entire country or students at standard 6 level, but also at teachers and their performance. And sometimes that is what is being used to say, well, you're a good teacher, this is a good school, this is the best school. And that is not always the case, because not because I have my students coming in top 10, it means that I am the best school. I may have one of 50 students who take the exam in the top 10. Does that mean that my school is the best school? Does it mean that I am the best teacher? And so while people may look at the PSC and the B.N.T.U as one tool with which we can say determine where our children are or how they are doing, that is not the only way to be able to do that. And so it disenfranchises a lot of our children who want to go to certain high schools because you can't get there because your grade wasn't good enough. But the child might be smart enough to be able to get there. So for those schools who use the report card along with the PSC, that child stands a better chance of getting into the school that they would like to get into. But for those schools who use only PSC, then that poses a challenge for that child. And so it seems that our teachers are quite satisfied with that move, and they feel that it is long overdue.
And has there been any, there has to be some level of assessment though,
right,
for implementing the curriculum.
Correct. And so some of them were asking, well, what will be put in place? Because as you said, there has to be a way of assessing where our children are. But that doesn't mean that we have to assess them nationally. They take exams at the end of every semester. At the end of the year, they take an exam that tells you how they've done over the year. And so that can work, but it's whether now what the high schools will be doing in terms of how they will determine who they will accept. Is it that they will not just use an exam? Is it that they will just use the report card grades to determine that? We don't know what would be. I think I heard the ministry saying something about B.N.T.U or an assessment test that they would be doing. So, but we don't know much about that, what that would be doing, how they will use that information, whether that will be connected to the high schools in any way. We're not aware of that, but something could be put in place to see how the children are performing at the various levels, not just standard 6 and standard 3, but at all the levels, because you want to see where they are moving from one level to the next.
Well, what we're going to do right now, there are other issues that we want to get into. Of course, we know that there is some figuring out for the reduction of the work week as well and how that's going. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be focusing on more issues. We'll continue our conversation with the president of the Belize National Teachers Union. So please stay tuned.
Whether it's back to the classroom or back on the tablets, the new school year is almost here. We know you missed seeing the children take center stage in 2020, but now Summerfest is back, pandemic style. Join us on August 27th for a virtual celebration of our talented Belizean children. We'll bring you all the family fun and entertainment right in the comfort of your home. Don't worry, we'll still have fantastic giveaways throughout the live show. All you have to do is follow us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ. Our annual Kids Talent Show starts at 6:30 a.m. live on 5 and streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Start your school year right with Summerfest 2021.
And we're back, and we are continuing our conversation with President of the Belize National Teachers Union, Senator Elena Smith. And we've been talking all about the return to the classrooms, what this means for teachers, what it means for parents, and the education system on a whole. Now, one of the most recent developments is the rollout of the curriculum review or curriculum update by the ministry. And I want to hear from you directly as to the level of involvement that teachers had in this process, and how you feel with the pilot project that's being rolled out?
We had one meeting with Dr. Zabane. He met with our council to share with us the book that he wrote. And that book speaks to those kinds of changes that he is suggesting. And so he met with us to share his book, and he gave us a copy of the book. A few of our executive members got a copy of the book as well. We gave five books per branch. And so, we shared with him some of our concerns that relates to what he was sharing with us and what some of those things would mean. So, for example, if it is that we are cutting down on subjects at the various levels, does it mean that, especially at the high school level, does that mean that we will then not need as many teachers? And so what would that mean for our teaching population right now? So if I go from 12 subjects, for example, to offering just 8, what does that mean for our teachers there? How will that impact our teachers, And then we looked at the primary level and how we would be cutting down, again, those subjects. What would that mean, again, for our teachers? Because as it is right now, we hear the ministry saying that some of our schools are overstaffed. But when you look at those schools and you look at the number of students per teacher, for the most part, each class would have over 15 students, some of them 20 the least. And so if I have 5 infant 1 teachers with 20 students, how is that level overstaffed? So must I only have 3 teachers? Because what they are looking at is the overall number of students for the school. So if the school has 1,000 students, you must have so many teachers and so many administrators. And if you have more than what that works out to be, then you are overstaffed. But you are not looking at.
It's based on a ratio, correct?
Correct. So you're not looking at, but it's the way how they look at it, because the thing says a minimum of 15 or 15 to 30. And if they are looking at the minimum, then if every class has 15 or 20 students, you still meet that threshold. But it seemed as if though they were looking at the higher number, so the maximum number, and if you had, again, 1,000 by 30, you must have so many teachers, and a lot of schools are overstaffed. And so those schools then were not given replacement teachers when somebody went on leave or that kind of thing. So how would that impact, and how would that further impact our teachers? So that was one of the concerns. Another one of the concerns as it relates to maybe the secondary school teachers or secondary school students was how would that impact the CXC? Because if you are doing less subjects, what would be the ones that would be taken out, and how would that impact what we take at the CXC level? But for the infant division, for the most part, our council, discussions that we had, our council seemed to have been okay with the reduction for the primary school, because we see where a lot of the activities, a lot of agencies who come in and they want to do a project, for example, it gets thrown onto the primary school. And then we have all of these subjects that our students have to take, plus do those things. And when we look at, for example, my days in school, I didn't have all of those subjects. I didn't have all of those books. We used to go to school with slate back in infant 1, but we still did well. And so is it that we are looking at the quality of what our students get, or is it that we are looking at quantity in terms of number of subject areas? And so I personally, for me, having been teaching for 36, 37 years, I believe that especially for the infant division, that we should be focusing on the basics, reading, writing, math, and get our children to have a good foundation. And then as we move up to the middle and upper division, we can add another 2 or so subjects. And some of these subjects can be integrated. Health science and science can go together, as opposed to having science and then health science. Put them together, integrate other subject areas and lessen. Because when you look at these children with these big bags on their back, my goodness.
Yeah. So, in general, the teachers are in agreement with a curriculum review. It's just the details as to how it will be rolled out.
Correct. And what would be the impact on our teachers and our students? You would think that the impact for the students would be a good one, because then they have less things to focus on, and we would be able to spend more time on the important areas for our students, the math, the reading, those kinds of areas that they're putting together. So we know that we understand that this year they're going to be piloting the new changes, and those changes, those piloting would occur, if I'm correct, I think Dr. Zabani told me, in 4 schools, in 4 government schools, either 4 or 5 schools would be piloting, and then next year they want to do the complete rollout of that new that new curriculum.
Now, you know, one of the things, especially when you start to shift things in the school, is that the parents are usually resistant to change as well. We were joking that the babies, for example, we now know they should be playing as a way of learning, but oftentimes it's the parents who come back with, they're not writing yet, they're not spelling yet. You know, what do you think is important in terms of the engagement of parents this early on if there's going to be this big shift in the curriculum review? In the curriculum?
Well, it's very critical that our parents understand, and from an early point, that what the change is going to be like, the reason for the change, and how the change is going to affect their children. Yeah. Because we have been accustomed to getting homework every day, for example, and the child get a whole lot of homework for math, for English, for science, for every day. But we don't really discuss with our parents the purpose of assignments. Why do we give assignments? Is it to just tire the child out? Is it to just get them busy? Assignments are for students to just practice what they learned in school for the day. And so you give them 3-4 problems, and that should be enough. You don't have to get in 20 and 50 problems. And if I am giving 20 and you give 20 and another one give 20, we are not considering, you know, the time that these children will take to complete all of our assignments. So again, parents must be made aware of the purpose of the change, you know, how the change is going to positively impact their students and what they should expect going forward. You can't want to have change but expect the same thing.
So let's shift gears to some other issues. Of course, the last time we had active conversations with the unions, it was about being able to work out with the government the 10% salary cut and all the additional measures that would come in place. Now, the 10% has been implemented, but there still are some details still being sorted through. Tell us about that.
Well, Marlene, we wrote the Prime Minister, the joint unions wrote the Prime Minister a while ago, because one of the things that we discussed was the formation of the committee, you know, because we are supposed to look at the finances every 6 months to see where we are and to determine, you know, what would be next. And so we wanted to form a committee that would be reviewing, that would be paying attention, you know, to finances, you know, our spending, our collections, that kind of thing, to be able to provide the government with suggestions as to how, you know, how we could better collect, you know, how we could better save. So in a sense, cost saving and some revenue enhancement measures that we would want to look at. We've not gotten officially a response from the Prime Minister, not even an acknowledgement. And I will tell you, the social partner senators wrote to him as well, and not even an acknowledgement of our letter. So that seemed to be the MO of the Prime Minister, that you write to him and he doesn't respond. We were told on Saturday that some members of the B.N.T.U CB, I don't know if they just went there on their own and they heard he was at the was it the Lang building, I think, and so they just went there and they ended up, you know, having a discussion with him, and so they raised the matter of that committee. And so we are hoping that from that discussion, then we will be getting some sort of a feedback from the Prime Minister, and we can start to have those discussions to put that committee in place, because we are now going to September now, and by next month we should be able to have at least our first review of where we are in terms of our finances. So we are hoping for that. The other matter was the matter of the reduction in work hours. And as you are aware, for the public officers, that worked out much easier. You either go work 8 to 4 or you go work 9 to 5 or some other way, but you know, so that was worked out. And our teachers were really and truly upset because, well, public officers got everything and we not get nothing because we hadn't worked out our 1 hour. We had made it very clear to the minister in those meetings that it's going to be difficult for us as teachers because we don't have any set working hours. I mean, you know, yes, we physically
hours.
Teach, right? We physically teach for a number of hours, but after those teaching hours, we still have to prepare work, we have to correct work, we have to make, you know. So really and truly teachers don't have set hours that we work for the week in terms of all that we have to do. While we have set hours to be in school, I mean, that is different. So anyway, so we met with the ministry and we were discussing, how that could work out. Our concern was, how can we do this without impacting our children as much, especially seeing that, where they were for the last school year. And so that was our primary concern. Despite what others might say, we were concerned about our students and how that would affect them. To make a long story short, we ended up we would then take the Fridays off. Because we did a survey and the ministry was involved with that survey to see, well, the first survey we did in-house. And our teachers, we had 3 options because the ministry came around a meeting with us and there were 3 options on the table, 3 suggestions. And a few of those suggestions, we had already discussed those as B.N.T.U, and so we would have asked our teachers which of those suggestions they wanted. There was one new one from the ministry, and so we didn't add any more to that. We just sent out those 3 options and the teachers selected. So they selected, working Monday to Thursday, and you're getting the Friday off. Now, let me clearly explain what we mean by off.
Yes.
Friday off meant that you would not be physically teaching, but your children would have to be given work for them to have work to do on Friday. So it's like you are still working for the whole week. It's just that on that Friday you don't have to present yourself in the classroom or online. You can choose, take that day and do whatever you want to do. Yeah, if you want to plan something, if you want to check papers, if you want to relax for the day and do everything we can, it's up to you. That would have been up to you.
Yeah.
So that was what we, our members had selected. We sent that to the CEO and we informed her of our decision. The minister then went on air and he made that pronouncement that it would be a full day work week. The issue we are having right now, Marlene, and I want to make it very clear, B.N.T.U is a legal agent responsible for bargaining for our teachers, whether it's your salaries, your condition of services. B.N.T.U is a legal agent. Now there are other stakeholders in the education sector that the ministry would want to hear from, for example, BAPS. So you would want to hear from these principals, what are their thoughts on this matter. But BAPS does not make the decision for teachers. And it seems right now that the ministry seems to be waiting to hear from BAPS to see what BAPS will say for them to finalize a decision. And that should not be. BAPS doesn't make decisions for teachers. And we keep saying that to the ministry, and for some reason, it's like they are refusing to understand that. Anything that will
perhaps it's deliberate that they're sort of playing one against the other.
Exactly, and this continues to happen. It's either BAPS or management or we meet to this one and then that one and then that one. Yes, they are stakeholders and you want to hear from them, but you must respect the fact that B.N.T.U is the legal bargaining agent for these teachers, and whenever you are changing anything to do with their wages, their conditions of service, it is the union who you negotiate with, not these other bodies. So I am not saying that you should not hear from them. Don't get me wrong. Yes, you listen to them, you hear from them, but you come to us to make that final decision. You don't go and make the decision with them and then come and tell us this is what you will do. It's going to create problems, and we have been warning the ministry from
But you have already
time and time.
communicated to the ministry that the
Yes.
teachers collectively have accepted to
Correct.
have Friday as a non-teaching day.
Correct. But what we are hearing now, and we wanted to have that official memo out before today, because classes begin today for secondary school teachers. And we have been getting feedback from our teachers that some of these principals have already prepared a full work week for them. And their schedule says Monday to Friday. There's no off day for these secondary school teachers, some of them. 1. 2, some of them have reported that their principals are telling them that even if the Friday is off, that they must report to school on that Friday because they will be having meetings, they will be having workshops. That is not.
They're still going to be assigned school-related stuff.
And that is not the agreement that we had. That is not the agreement that we had. And so that's why I'm saying.
So the agreement is if they don't want to go to school, they're not required to work on that day.
Right. That is our agreement and we discussed that with the ministry. And we were told that the minister has already said that it will be 4 days, and so that is what it's going to be. So why now are we having all of these different variations in what that Friday will be? What we have to understand.
Let's go back a bit, just for my clarity. So, as a teacher, if you're saying that you are still required to have students do work on Friday, is it perhaps a form of an assignment? Because if you were to go to school on Friday, you give the students homework to do over the weekend, right? Saturday and Sunday. So it would be the same concept in effect?
Correct. So,
Okay.
so the students can probably be doing a project on that day.
Okay.
You give them some sort of maybe a research to do, something where the child is going to be engaged, but the teacher doesn't have to be physically present
Yeah.
to oversee these students.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind though that Friday is not really an off day, because you still have to prepare the work for the entire week.
Yeah.
You still have to check that work anyway when the child brings it back. So it's not that you are going to be teaching Monday to Thursday and then not do anything on Friday or not do anything for Friday. You have
So
to
your
plan
weekly
for the whole
scheme
week.
includes Friday,
Correct.
even though you're not going to be physically there in the classroom.
Correct. So some of these persons have been trying to be very exact and saying, well, you know what, but Senator, that is going to be 6 hours. That's more than the 5 hours that we are giving you. That is going to be 5.5. That's half hour more than. Come on, half hour, an hour.
But
How
see,
much
it
more
was-
time do we give preparing these things?
Yeah.
I want, this was part of the conversation at the point of negotiation that I know you had been very vocal about, that where the government was saying with a 10% cut, you can cut down on work hours. It simply wasn't an easy formula for teachers.
Correct.
Because you have face-to-face time in the classroom on in a regular school year, but there's all the preparatory stuff, and there's also all the checking and planning and preparing the classroom that
Correct.
has to take place.
Correct.
There's no time measurement for that.
And that is why our teachers are saying, but in reality, we're not getting any time. Even if you give me Friday off, I still have all of this extra work that I have to do every day on a daily basis, including my weekends. And so while I may be free from being physically present to teach on that day, I still have to do all of this work. And so the only time that I am being given is that Friday where I will not be physically present in a classroom setting. And still we are having some issues, as I said, some administrators are saying to their teachers that you must come here for a 1 hour meeting every Friday, or you must come and do workshop every Friday. I mean, come on, why is it that we are allowing these other entities to make the decision for our teachers when we know that the union is the legal agent?
But the union has communicated to the ministry, and the ministry has announced
Correct.
that it'll be a 4-day work week.
Correct, but it seems as if though some of these administrators want to do this thing in their own way, and so they might not be satisfied with a 4-day work week, and so they want to do it how they want to do it. And the reason why we agreed on that, because we wanted it to be the same across the board. We don't want to have this school having Monday off and the other one Wednesday and the other one Friday. It had to be standardized.
Yeah.
So that all across the country we are doing the same thing. And that is the reason why we had looked at that option, because that would have been a standardized approach to everything.
Now, there's so much flexibility that is required around this time. I think in being able to find solutions that work for most. It can't work for all.
Right.
Because even when you consider things like rural schools, they already get one Friday off during the month. Moving forward, had there been the return of classroom face-to-face, this would have been the model either way, 4 days of classroom time?
Yes, because remember now, it's the government's, what word did they use? Yeah, but what they were giving us. And so even if we never asked for it, they were giving it to us. And so whether we were face-to-face or we were online, it would still end up with the same, with that same decision that we had to make. And so we try to find the least distracting situation, the one that would benefit or would be able to go across all levels. And I know that for secondary schools, yes, they are concerned because maybe high food farmers, CXC, those kinds of things. But it doesn't mean that the children will not be occupied on a Friday. They would still be getting work to do, so the teachers would still be putting in work.
So the teachers prepares 5 days worth of school of work, but they would only be required to teach for 4 days.
Correct.
Now, it's hard to even imagine that it was just a short while ago, but the unions, and especially the teachers union, went on a historic strike. What was the total? Was it 11 weeks?
5 weeks.
5 weeks, sorry. In pushing back against this salary cut. Looking at things as they are today, how are teachers doing, having had to face this financial crunch that they work so hard to fight against?
A lot of them are not doing well in terms of financially, because again, our teachers, we don't have the luxury of getting all of these benefits and allowances and that kind of thing. So you have to buy your own uniform. For the most part, most of them they have to find their way to school. You have to fix up your class. Well, you don't have to, but teachers have been accustomed to fixing up the classroom without support, or with least support or minimal support from schools or managements. And so all of those things are out-of-pocket expenses that teachers have to go through. And so with the 10% cut, you still have to do those other things. You still have to get a uniform. You still have to, travel to school every day. You have to get your lunch every day. And some administrators, they don't seem to be in an understanding mood right now. They still expect teachers to still do what they would normally do and have your classroom well fixed up. 1. 2, we also have the ministry who normally comes in to visit your classroom, and they come with a checklist. And so you have to have all of these things in your classroom checked off, and if you don't have them, then the school is placed at a certain level. And so then if the ministry is pressuring the administration, they pressure the teachers.
And the cost is borne by the teacher.
By the teacher. And so there is no pressure from the ministry on managements to say, listen, as a manager of this school, you must provide these resources. That pressure isn't there, but the pressure is on the teachers. And so we keep saying to the ministry, you all have to start pressuring managements, because the moment a teacher does something wrong, the rules are thrown at us. You are sanctioned, you are dealt with because you disobey a rule. But when the managements, they don't do what they ought to do, who is there pressuring, who is there sanctioning them? We hardly ever hear of that, we hardly ever see that. And that has to be addressed, because our teachers can't continue to cope with these expenses, especially right now with this salary cut. 1. 2, if your children in your class don't have their textbooks, there are a lot of our teachers who provide books for our students. They provide meals for them. They help with uniform, So with all of these, teachers are still doing those things. And right now it is difficult, because with their own children going to school, with the decrease in salary, transportation going up, food going up, everything going up, our teachers have been complaining that it is really tough on a lot of them.
The Public Service Union reacted when they heard reports of persons who were exempted from the 10% cut. The CEOs, for example, looking at the increase in the Governor General salary, and also the judiciary. The Teachers Union, though, didn't put out a position.
Right. We didn't put out a release or anything of that sort, but you would have heard my presentation in the Senate. And we made it very clear that we were not in support of that any at all. In none of our discussions that we had, none of our consultation that we had with the government side, was it ever mentioned that those persons would have been exempted. We only discussed those persons earning less than $1,000 per month. Those were exempted from the cut. And we understood that, because when we looked at those persons and we look at what they were earning, those persons really actually couldn't afford. So we had to have a heart and say, listen, man, somebody earning $600 or $700 a month, come on, how will they survive? Now we have teachers and public officers who are not earning much over $1,000, either $1,200 per month, and they're getting a 10% cut. It's hard on them as well. But we figured, that let's be considerate of those less fortunate, if you want to call it that way. But in terms of the CEOs, there was never any discussions to have those persons exempt from this 10% cut. And we have to understand that some of these persons are new persons. Well, most of the CEOs are new, because when the government changes, the new government brings in their own people. So it's not like they were there before and they were getting all of these monies for 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years ago, and you cut me suddenly. They are just coming in. And you are just coming in and you want to get all of these benefits and you don't want to sacrifice with us? The government, the Prime Minister, the Senate, everybody, churches, everybody who voted for the cut, they were saying we must all sacrifice together. So why are they that more important than us? So are we not equal then? So we work and they work, but we must suffer because of them. And those are the persons who are getting the biggest benefits. The biggest benefit. Marlene, we don't, as I said, we don't get no uniform allowance, you know. We don't get no telephone allowance. We don't get no gas allowance. And still we got a 10% cut with our small salaries. If you compare, for example, my salary that I'm getting right now as a teacher with a master's degree, and look at what a public officer who has a master's degree is earning, it's a huge difference. Pay scales, I don't know, for 16 to 21, something of that sort. It's a huge difference. So why should you be exempt? And then the Governor General, we said clearly that we are not against the Governor General earning a proper salary. But the time is not right. The government doesn't have the funds, they can't afford it, so let the Governor General wait until the 3 years is up and the government can afford it, and then she gets her proper salary. There was never a thing that, oh well, she shouldn't be getting, proper compensation. The time isn't right. She has to.
Is the argument then that, well, we're adjusting the salary, if that were the case, for one individual, as opposed to the vast majority of teachers and public officers in this case?
Well, exactly. If you are telling me that you have to cut me and then I'm going to give you and I'm going to give you, then are you cutting me to give you? Why are you cutting me? And why is it that at this time when the country can't afford it, you need to have that amount of money? Why can't you survive on the 57 that you were getting initially? And then you are the same person who have to sign off on the bill that says you will cut my salary, and then you have to sign off on one that says, but I will increase my salary. How does that look? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
As a person who has, we are always saying that she's a humble person. She comes from a humble beginning. She loves her people. Then think about us. How do you feel to see that you, a person from a humble beginning, just like myself, we are from the same district, you feel the need to get this increase at this time? It doesn't come across well. It doesn't make for good relationships. It doesn't give the correct signal of the government that you want for people to work with you, but you turn around and you go and behind our backs you exempt these persons from this sacrifice that you want all of us to take.
So at the 6-month check-in, which is due, as you said, in September, part of the negotiation was that you'd be able to form a committee where you'd review finances. That would be an opportunity for you to look at those measures?
Well, we are hoping so. We know that the Deputy Prime Minister, at least, and I think it was Honorable Fonseca, had indeed said that they didn't agree with the CEOs being exempt. And so we do see that those are two persons of the negotiating team, of the consultation team, and they were not in agreement with the decision of Cabinet. So we are hoping that those persons would go back to their colleagues and would have that discussion and would see or understand the need for us to be all on the same page. If we are all suffering, let us all suffer together. It can't be that you are better than me. Can't be.
All right. Well, Elena, President Smith, we've covered quite a bit this morning. Before we close off, though, today is the resumption of school for secondary schools, and next week primary level starts. What's your message on behalf of the teachers to the wider public, to parents who are about to take on this challenge once again, and understanding the flexibility that's required by all at this moment?
Well, I would like to encourage our students to, take your time to do your work, be engaged in your online classes, ensure that you log on every day, and you just don't log on, but you're attentive to what is going on in the classroom, and you do what you must do as a student. To our parents, I want to ask you to understand the current situation, support your children. You find a quiet place for them in your home, ensure that they are behind that computer every day and they're not just sitting there, but that they are engaged, that you can discuss with them to see, what are they learning, what concerns they have, what questions they have, and encourage them to reach out to their teachers for help if they need the help. Because that is the one thing that we are hearing, that with the online, because they're not face to face, they don't reach out to the teachers to ask for help. And so, especially those who are shy. So encourage your children to do that. And teachers, all I can ask you to do is to do your best. Once you do your best, there's nothing else that anybody else can say. And so I am pleading to you to ensure that you are on time for your classes, that you work with your children as best as you can, that you make yourselves available for them when they need that extra help, and that you understand their situation and you do your best to give them the best that you can give them. Right now, we know that you are concerned regarding your vaccine and having to take that test every 2 weeks, but we are hoping that as we continue to discuss with the minister, that maybe something can be worked out, especially now that they are working from home. They don't have to be in the classroom, and so there might not be the need for them to have to present those negative tests at this point in time because they're not around the students. So we hope that can be worked out. And we wish all of you all the best. Continue to do a great job.
All right. And with that, we want to say thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate the update from the union's perspective as we start yet another school year in the midst of a pandemic. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be finding out more about the Belize Culture Symposium. So please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.